Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we are diving deep, deep into the world of mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
Exactly. We'll be pulling some really fascinating bits from Ellen J. Langer's audiobook,
Oh
Mindfulness.
yeah, a classic.
Yeah,
A classic for a reason.
it's all about how mindlessness shapes our lives,
Yeah.
and how we can become more empowered by being, well, mindful. Get ready for some really interesting stuff like, that wild nursing home experiment
Oh, right. Yeah.
and the whole ugly duckling thing. I mean, who knew?
Yeah, those are some good ones. We'll get to those later.
Mm-hmm.
It really is fascinating how much this mental state, or the lack of it, I guess you could say, can affect our choices,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
our
Yeah.
health,
Yeah.
even how we see reality itself. Like, it's mind-blowing.
So to kick things off, Langer tells this story, right? About a guy who needs a piece of wood,
Hmm.
like desperately. It's 2 a.m. He's offering this woman $10,000. $10,000 for a piece of wood.
Wow, that's dedication.
Right. But here's the thing. The woman is totally stumped. She's like, I don't have any wood. But guess what? The next day, it hits her. She could have just given him a door.
A door. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like, hello, a door is made of wood. How did they both miss that?
It's the perfect example of what Langer calls entrapment by category. It's one of the three main ways she defines mindlessness in the book.
Entrapment by category.
Yeah, the woman was so focused on the door as a thing, as a category.
Well, like a door is a door, not wood.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
She couldn't see past that to his other potential, like as a source of wood.
It's like we get trapped in these mental boxes. It stops us from seeing simple solutions.
It happens all the time.
All the time. Like, like saying, excuse me to a mannequin.
Oh, yeah.
Or writing the wrong year on a check in January.
I've been there.
Happens to the best of us. We're on autopilot.
And it's not just anecdotes. There's some really interesting research that backs this up. Back in 1896, get this, these psychologists, Solomons and Stein.
Wow, way back.
Yeah. They figured out that people could read and write automatically, like without even thinking about it.
Whoa, that's wild. So it's like our brains have these pre-programmed scripts, right? They just take over without us realizing it.
Exactly. And it can get us into some funny situations.
Speaking of funny situations, remember that Xerox machine experiment? People were totally willing to let someone cut in line if they gave a reason. Any reason.
Right, even if the reason was totally ridiculous.
Like, I need to make copies. Well, duh. Everyone's there to make copies, but they still let them cut.
Exactly. And that's a perfect illustration of the second definition of mindlessness that Langer talks about. Automatic behavior.
Automatic behavior, okay.
The folks in that study, they weren't really paying attention to what was being said. They were just reacting to this familiar pattern.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
So what about the third definition? I remember it had something to do with ACE bandages, right?
Oh, yeah, you're thinking of the sprained knee experiment. In this one, they told some participants they needed an ACE bandage for a fake sprained knee.
Right, right.
And then they made it clear that, like, an ACE bandage just wasn't an option. It wasn't available.
Okay, and?
Well, get this. People got so fixated on getting that ACE bandage, they couldn't think of anything else. Like, there were other solutions, other ways to wrap or support the injured knee.
So they were trapped by the idea of the ACE bandage, even though it wasn't even possible.
Exactly. It's that acting from a single perspective definition of mindlessness. We get so locked into one way of seeing things, and it really messes with our problem-solving skills.
It's like we're missing out on a whole world of possibilities because we're stuck on one thing. So why do we get stuck in these mindless ruts in the first place? Like, what's the deal?
Well, for one thing, repetition plays a huge role. Like, the more we do something over and over,
The less we actually think about it?
you got it. Langer, she uses this example of experienced typists. You know, people who type all the time, they actually struggle more when you ask them to type without any spaces between words.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. They're so used to the rhythm, right? And throwing it off messes them up completely.
Exactly. And that brings us to the idea of premature cognitive commitments. These are like those early impressions we form about things without really questioning them.
Okay.
And they kind of become these mindsets, that can be really tough to shake.
Oh, so like that story about the priest's poodle carrying the prayer book.
That's the one. The nuns were totally freaking out, right?
Right.
Because all they saw was a dog's mouth, and in their minds, a dog's mouth equals unclean, like automatically.
Right, they totally missed the context that it was a well-behaved dog just trying to help its owner.
It's a prime example of how those rigid categories can lead us to some pretty absurd conclusions. And what's really interesting is that, these mindsets, they often form early on, and they can be surprisingly hard to change, even when we know better.
So we're basically stuck with them.
Not necessarily, but it takes effort.
Okay, good.
There's this experiment where researchers actually made up a fake disorder. They called it chromosynthesis.
Amosynthesis. Catchy.
Right. And get this, the subjects who were given information about this made-up condition, they actually started reporting experiencing the symptoms.
Wait a minute. So just hearing about a fake disorder made people think they had it? That's crazy.
It is. And it really underscores how much power our initial perceptions have over our actual experience.
Okay, that's kind of unsettling, but also really fascinating.
Right. And this is where mindfulness comes in. It's all about challenging those initial perceptions, not taking things for granted.
So mindfulness is like the antidote to mindlessness.
You could say that. It's about being more present, more aware, more in the moment.
So if we're like wired for mindlessness, how do we cultivate its opposite? How do we actually become more mindful?
Well, there are a lot of different techniques and approaches, but one key step is challenging the limited resources belief.
Limited resources.
Yeah, it's this mindset that makes us cling to those rigid categories.
Uh-huh.
Like we assume there's only so much to go around.
Yeah.
Langer, she uses the example of college admissions.
Oh, right. College admissions, super competitive.
Exactly. So if we think intelligence is like a fixed, limited resource.
Then we end up supporting systems that categorize people based on like test scores and stuff.
Precisely. But what if intelligence isn't actually limited? What if it's something that could grow and change?
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. It changes the whole game.
Right. It's about shifting our perspective. She also talks about how this plays out in divorce cases, like parents fighting over custody.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they often view the child's love as something to be divided up, like a pie or something.
But love isn't finite, is it? Like, a child can love both parents fully.
Exactly. It's not a limited resource. We create these artificial limits that aren't actually real.
Speaking of limits, I love that example of the Coolidge effect.
Coolidge effect. Refresh my memory.
It's where some animals regain their, shall we say, stamina with a new partner, even if they were, exhausted before.
Ah, right. It's like new partner, new energy.
Exactly. And then there's that story about those kids hiking Mount Chukarua, remember? They were convinced they couldn't go any further. They were totally spent.
Oh, yeah.
But then their dad tricked them, telling them they were almost there.
And suddenly they found the energy to keep going.
Yep. It shows that our limits, both physical and mental, can be surprisingly subjective.
Totally. We often set boundaries on our abilities based on assumptions that may not even be true.
Mind over matter. So are we saying that mindlessness is partly about how we view time?
That's a big part of it. We tend to see time as this straight line, always moving forward.
Yeah, that's how I usually think of it.
But what if we consider other ways of viewing time, like cyclical time, or time as a universal present?
Wait, are you suggesting time travel might be possible?
Not necessarily. But even some physicists like James Jeans and Sir Arthur Eddington, they saw the universe as more of a great idea, something that's, well, open to action and change.
Okay, I'm following you. So if time isn't this fixed linear thing,
Then maybe we have more agency within it than we think. Maybe we're not just passive passengers on this one-way track.
this is blowing my mind. Okay, so how do we apply these big abstract concepts to our everyday lives? Like, how can we actually be more mindful?
Well, let's start with a story everyone knows, the ugly duckling.
Mm.
Remember, his whole self-image, it totally transformed when he was in a new environment.
Right, he went from feeling like an outcast to realizing he was a beautiful swan.
Exactly. The context changed, and so did his perception of himself. It's a powerful reminder that we're not fixed entities.
Like, our sense of self can evolve.
Exactly. It can be influenced by our surroundings, by our experiences, by how we choose to see things.
This reminds me of that experiment where they told people to think of electric shocks as new physical sensations.
Wild, right?
Oh, yeah, that one's a classic. And they found that simply renaming the experience, like changing the label, actually made people less anxious. Their pulse rates were lower, too.
Wow. So the way we label things, the words we use, it really does affect how we experience them.
It totally does. And our values play a huge role, too. Langer talks about this study where people could recognize value-laden words faster.
Value-laden words.
Yeah, like words related to politics, religion, things like that. But here's the catch. They recognize them faster if those values were personally important to them.
Oh, interesting. So, like, our values act as filters.
Exactly. They shape our attention, they influence what we notice and how we interpret it, which then impacts our thoughts, our feelings, our actions.
The whole shebang. It's all connected.
Okay, so we're seeing how pervasive this mindlessness is. Like, it's everywhere. We get caught in routines, rigid thinking.
It's the human condition, but we don't have to be slaves to it.
So how do we break free? What's the key to becoming more mindful?
That's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned. Okay, so how do we break free? What's the key to becoming more mindful?
That's the core of mindfulness.
Yeah.
Right. Actively engaging with the present moment, questioning assumptions, being open to new possibilities.
So it's more than just like being in the moment, like some Zen master or something.
Oh, yeah, way more than that. It's about recognizing that our perceptions are constructed, not fixed. We have a choice in how we see the world, ourselves even.
This makes me think of what Langer says about, education. She argues that our focus on outcomes, the grades, the right college, the promotions, it actually encourages mindlessness. Yeah, we're so fixated on that end goal that we kind of lose sight of, the learning and the growth along the way.
It's subtle, but it's everywhere, that kind of thinking. We're taught to value achievement over exploration, which, well, it can stifle creativity.
So instead of asking, can I do this, we should
Yeah.
be asking, how can I do this?
Exactly. It's about shifting from fear of failure to curiosity about the process.
And that ties back to challenging those premature cognitive commitments we talked about.
Oh, absolutely. Instead of just blindly accepting those categories and labels we've been given, we need to pause. Ask ourselves, is this really true? Is there another way to see this?
It's like, don't believe everything you think.
Right. Cultivate a healthy skepticism. Be willing to question the status quo and consider alternative perspectives. Langer calls this mindful questioning, and it's a big part of breaking free from mindlessness.
Is there a danger in questioning everything, though? Don't we need some certainty, some stability?
Of course, but it's about finding that balance between, stability and flexibility, acceptance and questioning. Mindfulness isn't about like rejecting everything you've learned or living in this constant state of uncertainty.
Okay, so it's not about doubting everything.
No, it's about recognizing that our knowledge is always evolving. There's always more to learn.
So it's more about curiosity than doubt.
You got it. It's about expanding our awareness, not tearing everything down.
This is so empowering. Like, we're not just passive recipients of reality, right? We're active participants in creating it.
Like the beauty of mindfulness. It empowers us to take ownership of our thoughts, feelings, actions, to shape our experience more consciously.
Okay, we've covered a lot here. We've explored the nature of mindlessness, its causes, its costs. We've touched on the power of mindfulness, the potential benefits. But I'm still wondering, what are some concrete steps we can take to cultivate more mindfulness? Like, what does this look like in practice?
That's the question, right? And Langer, she gives us a bunch of practical strategies in her book, from simple awareness exercises to like more profound shifts in perspective.
Can you give us a few examples just to get us started?
Sure. One simple but powerful practice is paying attention to your physical sensations. Like when you're eating, really focus on the taste, the texture, the aroma of the food. Notice how it feels in your mouth, how it makes your body feel.
So it's about engaging all of our senses, being fully present in the moment.
Exactly. It helps break us free from those habitual patterns of mindlessness that dominate our daily routines,
What about our thoughts and emotions? How do we become more mindful of those?
Langer suggests something called labeling without judgment. So you notice the thoughts and feelings that arise, but you don't get caught up in them. You just acknowledge them without trying to change them or push them away.
So it's like observing our inner world without getting swept away by the drama.
Exactly. You create some space between your thoughts and feelings, and that gives you more choice in how you respond to them.
Okay, that makes sense. What about our interactions with others? How can we be more mindful in our relationships?
One of the best things you could do is practice active listening. When someone is speaking to you, really focus on what they're saying, their words, their tone, their body language. Try to understand their perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
It's like putting aside our own agenda, our judgments, and truly tuning in to the other person.
Exactly. It creates this sense of connection and understanding, fosters empathy and compassion.
And I bet that can be super helpful in like resolving conflicts, both personally and professionally.
Absolutely. Mindfulness helps us approach disagreements with with more clarity and composure, which allows us to find solutions that work for everyone involved.
Okay, this is all starting to come together. Mindfulness is about paying attention, questioning assumptions, being open to new possibilities. It's about engaging with the present moment, both internally and externally. But I'm still wondering, what are the long-term benefits of cultivating this awareness? Like, what kind of impact can it have on our lives?
That's a great question, and one that research is starting to answer more fully now. Studies have shown that mindfulness can reduce stress and anxiety,
Mm.
improve focus, boost creativity, and even strengthen our immune system.
Hold on, mindfulness can make us physically healthier.
That's what the research suggests. It seems that by calming our minds and reducing stress, mindfulness can have these positive ripple effects on our overall well-being, both mental and physical.
This is incredible. So, mindfulness isn't just some esoteric concept. It's a practical tool for living a happier, healthier, more fulfilling life.
Exactly. It's about waking up from that autopilot of mindlessness and engaging with the world in a more conscious and intentional way.
Okay, so we've explored the theory, the practice, and the benefits. But I'm still wondering, how do we make this shift? How do we go from being mindless to mindful? What's the secret sauce?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a journey. And like any good journey, it unfolds one step at a time. There's no magic bullet or overnight transformation.
So, no secret sauce. Bummer. But I guess it makes sense. You can't just snap your fingers and become a mindfulness guru.
Exactly. But with consistent effort and a willingness to explore, we can all cultivate more mindfulness in our lives. It's like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
So, small changes, new habits, gradually shifting our awareness, that's the key.
That's a big part of it. And remember, it's a process, not a destination. There will be times when we fall back into old patterns of mindlessness. We're human, after all.
Oh, good. Because I was starting to feel like I needed to be perfectly mindful all the time, which honestly sounds exhausting.
That's not the goal at all. It's about noticing when we're on autopilot and gently guiding ourselves back to the present moment. It's like learning to ride a bike. You're going to wobble and maybe even fall a few times, but eventually you find your balance.
That's a great analogy, and it makes mindfulness feel a lot less intimidating. It feels like something that's accessible to everyone, no matter their background or beliefs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a human capacity we all possess, and it's something we can all develop and refine over time.
Okay, so we've established that it's a journey, it takes effort, and it's okay to mess up. But I'm still curious, what are some specific things we can do to be more mindful in our daily lives?
Well, there are a lot of different techniques and practices out there, but one of the simplest and most effective is simply paying attention to your breath.
Really? Just breathing. That seems too easy.
It may seem simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Our breath is always with us. It's a constant anchor to the present moment. When you find your mind wandering, gently bring your attention back to your breath. Notice the rise and fall of your chest, the sensation of air entering and leaving your nostrils.
Okay, I can see how that would be helpful. It's like a little mental reset button. What else? Any other mindfulness hacks?
Another great practice is mindful walking. Instead of rushing from point A to point B, try slowing down and paying attention to the sensations of walking. Feel your feet connecting with the ground. Notice the movement of your legs and arms. Pay attention to the sights, sounds, and smells around you.
So it's about turning an ordinary activity into an opportunity to be more present. I like that. It's like sneaking in mindfulness without having to carve out extra time in my day.
Exactly. And speaking of time, that's another area where we can practice mindfulness. Instead of constantly rushing or worrying about the future, try to focus on being fully present in each moment.
Easier said than done, right? Our minds are always racing ahead, thinking about what's next on the to-do list, stressing about deadlines, replaying conversations in our heads.
It's true, our minds are wired to think ahead and plan for the future. But the problem is that when we spend too much time in our heads, we miss out on the richness of the present moment.
I can definitely relate to that. I'm a master at overthinking and worrying about things that haven't even happened yet. So how do we break free from that mental hamster wheel?
One helpful technique is to practice gratitude. Take a few moments each day to appreciate the good things in your life, no matter how small they may seem.
Okay, I can see how that would shift our focus to the positive. But what about the not so good things? How do we deal with stress, anxiety, or negative emotions in a mindful way?
That's where the practice of acceptance comes in. Mindfulness isn't about avoiding or suppressing difficult emotions. It's about acknowledging them without judgment.
So it's like saying, hey, anxiety, I see you there. You're not comfortable, but I'm not going to fight you or pretend you don't exist.
Exactly. It's about allowing those emotions to be there without getting swept away by them. It's about observing them with curiosity and compassion.
And over time, the idea is that those difficult emotions will have less power over us.
That's the hope. By practicing mindfulness, we learn to create space between ourselves and our emotions. We realize that we are not our thoughts or our feelings. We are the observer of those thoughts and feelings.
This is starting to sound a lot like meditation. Is that what you're getting at?
Meditation is definitely a powerful tool for cultivating mindfulness. But mindfulness is more than just meditation. It's a way of life. It's about bringing that same awareness and attention to everything we do, whether we're eating, walking, working, or interacting with others.
Okay, I'm starting to get a clearer picture of what mindfulness looks like in practice, but I'm still curious, what are some of the long-term benefits of cultivating this kind of awareness? Does it actually change our brains or how we experience the world?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. Neuroscience research has shown that mindfulness practice can actually rewire our brains in positive ways.
Wait, really? You mean like physically changing the structure of our brains?
Exactly. Studies have shown that mindfulness can increase gray matter in areas of the brain associated with attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. It can also decrease activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain that's responsible for our fight or flight response.
So it's like mindfulness is giving our brains a workout, strengthening the areas that help us stay calm, focused, and resilient.
That's a great way to put it. And the benefits extend beyond our brains. Mindfulness has also been shown to improve our physical health.
We touched on this earlier, but remind me, what kind of health benefits are we talking about?
Well, for starters, mindfulness can lower our stress levels,
Hmm.
which has a cascade of positive effects on our bodies. It can also improve our sleep, boost our immune system, and even lower our blood pressure.
This is amazing. It sounds like mindfulness is a magic bullet after all.
I wouldn't go that far. It's not a cure-all, but it's a powerful tool that can help us live healthier, happier, and more fulfilling lives.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored what mindfulness is, how to cultivate it, and the amazing benefits it can offer. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you said earlier. You mentioned that mindfulness is a way of life. What does that actually mean? How can we integrate mindfulness into our daily routines and make it a sustainable practice?
That's the key, isn't it? It's not just about meditating for a few minutes each day. It's about bringing that mindful awareness to everything we do. And the good news is, there are countless ways to do that.
So give us some examples. How can we sneak mindfulness into our busy lives?
Well, one way is to turn everyday activities into mindfulness practices. For example, when you're washing the dishes, instead of letting your mind wander, really focus on the sensations of the warm water, the soapy suds, the feel of the dishes in your hands.
I'll admit, I usually use dishwashing time to mentally plan my grocery list or rehearse arguments I'll never have. But I see your point. It's about bringing our full attention to the task at hand, no matter how mundane it may seem.
Exactly. And the same principle can be applied to any activity. Whether you're brushing your teeth, folding laundry, or walking the dog, bring your full attention to the present moment.
So mindfulness isn't about adding more things to our to-do lists. It's about changing our relationship to the things we're already doing.
That's a great way to put it. It's about shifting our focus from doing to being, from rushing to savoring, from autopilot to awareness.
I love that. And it makes mindfulness feel a lot less daunting. It's not about becoming some kind of enlightened being. It's about making small, intentional shifts in our everyday lives.
And those small shifts can have a ripple effect, creating positive changes in our thoughts, our emotions, our relationships, and our overall well-being.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of mindfulness and how I can integrate it into my life.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the journey. The more you practice mindfulness, the more natural it will become. And as you become more aware, you'll start to see the world in a whole new light.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. What's a question they can ask themselves to spark that mindful awareness? What's something they can take away from this deep dive and apply to their lives right now?
Well, building on what we've talked about, how about this? If our mindsets really do create our reality,
Mm-hmm.
what reality might you be, overlooking right
Oh,
now?
that's good. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What possibilities are you maybe missing because you're kind of stuck in one way of thinking?
That's a powerful question. It challenges us to, really step outside of our comfort zones to question those assumptions we've been clinging to.
Exactly. And to be open to new perspectives, new ways of seeing
It's
things.
like a reminder that there's always more to see, more to experience, more to learn.
Mindfulness is all about cultivating that sense of curiosity, that childlike wonder, approaching each moment with fresh eyes.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I've not only learned so much about mindfulness, but also I've gained this new appreciation for like the power of our minds. Like we can actually shape our reality.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And remember, this is just the beginning. The beauty of mindfulness is that it's a lifelong practice. It's a continuous process of discovery and growth.
And it's a journey that's open to absolutely everyone. You don't need any special equipment. You don't need to go on a fancy retreat. You can start right now in this very moment
That's right.
just by like paying attention to your breath,
Your surroundings.
your thoughts,
Yeah.
your feelings.
Exactly. Mindfulness is about bringing that same awareness and attention to every single aspect of our lives.
It's about waking up to the richness, the beauty of right now and realizing that we have the power to choose how we experience it all. So to all our listeners out there, I encourage you to keep exploring, keep practicing, keep diving deep into this world of mindfulness. You might be surprised at what you find.
And remember, if you ever feel lost, overwhelmed, just come back to your breath. It's always there, that constant anchor to the present moment.
That's a great reminder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into mindfulness. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.